Hello and a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 14th March 2026, brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be looking into the 7 set of current affairs issues which are featured in today's newspaper. The handout of this very discussion has been pinned in the comment section below for your future reference. Beginning with the analysis section, in the first topic, we'll try and understand that why Indian cities are referred to be as the engines of growth. What are the challenges that we are witnessing in these urban fronts, and how we can make Indian cities work for its citizens. Moving on to the second topic, herein we'll try and understand the significance of paid menstrual leave for the working woman and why in this respect Supreme Court has raised apprehensions regarding giving legal backing to paid menstrual leaves. Moving on to the prelim pointer segment, herein we'll be covering the 5 set of current affairs issues which are more relevant from your prelims perspective. So, we'll be doing the value addition which would be relevant for your upcoming prelims examination. So, stay tuned. So, now beginning with the first topic, which is dealing with cities as engines of growth. You can relate this particular topic with GS paper 1 and therein you have a specific topic, that is urbanization. What is the context right now? So recently, a parliamentary committee, that is Standing Committee on Housing and Urban Affairs, have given a recommendation to the government that please create a high-level expert committee which can assess the India's urban infrastructure requirements, financing needs and governance reforms that are needed. Previously, the last high-powered expert committee that we have created was in 2011 and it has provided us the projections till 2030 only. Okay, so the Parliamentary Standing Committee has made a very valid point that we also need projections beyond this 2030 timeline. Okay, so that is the reason an expert level committee should be created so that we can effectively assess that what is the true demand when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to governance reforms which are needed to be introduced in the urban hubs in India. When it comes to this Parliamentary Standing Committee, it has pointed out that currently, although very good number of schemes are being run when it comes to urban areas, like for example, Amrut 2.0 scheme is going on, which is dealing with improving the water supply and sewage facilities. We have Swachh Bharat Mission Urban, which is focusing upon sanitation and all. We have the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana 2.0. Therein also we have made great advancement in this respect. Then we are focusing upon mobility also, especially green mobility. So we have come up with the PM e-bus seva, okay, wherein we are coming up with e-buses. And all of these are in alignment with the idea of Viksit Bharat by 2047. But the problem is, these schemes are targeting different sectors. And currently, we lack a long-term urban investment and strategy framework. Okay, we are doing good in different segments, but an integrated approach when it comes to urban planning, that is missing when it comes to India. And that is the reason the Standing Committee has made a very fair point that to do that, we need to come up with a high-level expert committee. Now, the first thing that we'll be looking into that why the government focuses upon urban centers, okay, why they are considered to be as India's growth engines. Because firstly, you look at the contribution of these urban centers to the GDP. As highlighted by this year economic survey itself, that currently they are contributing around 60% to India's GDP, and the World Bank has made this projection that by 2036 itself, the Indian cities would be contributing around 70% to India's GDP. And this year economic survey has rightly pointed out that if you double the city size, you are going to boost the productivity by 12% in India. Why am I saying this, that the productivity would increase by 12%? You need to understand behind this all thing is the agglomeration economies. What are agglomeration economies? See, when it comes to industries, they will prefer to set up their manufacturing base wherein they can get good quality infrastructure, shared resources, and a place where for them it is very easier to find the skilled labor force as well. So they'll prefer these urban centers wherein they can easily use the shared resources here, infrastructure, and there it becomes easier for them to hire the skilled labor force as well because the educational universities are also nearby. So if you widen the urban cities, what happens is we'll be able to reap the benefit of agglomeration economies, and that is the reason the productivity would increase by 12%. Secondly, as and when the core industries, okay, core industrial hubs, the core industrial cities are growing, for example, Delhi NCR region, for example, Bangalore region, it is also leading to the development of the satellite cities which are situated close to these core, urban centers. Like when you talk about Delhi NCR, it is leading to the development of satellite cities like Noida, Greater Noida. Okay, so it is also enabling us to increase the economic activities in the satellite cities as well, which over a period of time would be emerging as regional clusters as well. Then they thrive a good innovation ecosystem as well. You take the example of Hyderabad, Genome Valley, wherein you can see biotech firms and startups and all you will see majorly in these urban centers itself. Pune, Hyderabad, they are known for R&D and startup culture. Then you need to understand that in the urban centers, since people have more money, so they will be demanding more and more services, financial services, transportation related services. They'll be using more Zomato and Swiggy. Okay, this is also a part of the services sector. So in the urban areas, you will see services-led economic growth, and this is pretty common in metro cities like Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad. Then the infrastructure development is further driving the regional connectivity, and it is going to lead to thriving of economic activity in the satellite cities which are situated close in the geographical proximity of the core cities. Okay, as this year economic survey has pointed out that we have made great advancement when it comes to the metros and all. This is enabling us to improve the connectivity, and when you have better connectivity, ultimately this would lead to better exchange of ideas, people, and all that stuff would happen, and ultimately this would help us in improving the productivity also, because the better the transportation would be, the better it would be for the companies to get the resources. Logistic cost would also be very less. And lastly, from investment point of view also, cities are very important. Just look at this data pointed out by Times of India, that in 2025, what happened? The two states, that is Maharashtra and Karnataka, which are having more areas under the urban areas, they attracted 51% of the nation's total FDI during 2024-25 financial year. Why this is so? Because of this idea of agglomeration economies. Even the foreign investors would prefer to invest in an area where they know that the productivity is going to be high, and urban centers are characterized by high productivity, and that is the reason you see that majority of the foreign investment is also coming to these urban centers. These are the major reasons why the Indian cities are referred to be as engines of growth. But these engines of growth are facing a lot of constraint also, as highlighted by this year economic survey. So whatever constraint I've mentioned, these are basically I've taken from this year economic survey itself. Now the first concern which the economic survey rightly points out, that when it comes to the urban local bodies, they lack the agency. Agency basically means the freedom to make a choice. They lack functional autonomy. They lack financial autonomy, because when you look at their own source revenue, it is less than 1% of the GDP. They are majorly dependent upon property tax, and that is also not effectively being collected. Okay, so they are majorly dependent upon the grants that they get from state, that they get from central government. And another problem when it comes to the urban areas is that you have a multi-layered governance structure. Okay, we have a fragmented governance structure. You have urban local bodies, and at the same time you also have development authorities, you have this jal boards, okay, electricity boards. So we have created a lot of parastatal agencies which at times are encroaching the functional domain of the urban local bodies. So it is not just the urban local body which is managing all the stuff, okay, for example development, for example infrastructure creation, the electricity, water. So if everything is not being controlled by one body, obviously there would be shifting of accountability. Nobody would be ready to take the accountability that okay, because of us this failure is happening. So when you have this fragmented governance structure, it becomes very difficult to hold a particular entity accountable for the problems that we are witnessing in the urban areas. And it also negatively impacts the social contract which is between the citizens and the urban local bodies. Because see, we as citizens, we would be considering cities as our own responsibility when we see that okay, there is some continuity in the policies, and we can see that okay, this particular entity has to be held accountable if things are going wrong. But we don't see that. There is no continuity. As I told you in the first context page itself, that we have various schemes, but they are targeting different sectors. We don't have any single entity which is managing all these schemes, which are, making an intervention in different sectors. So if you want that the people should consider city as their own homes, if you want to give effect to endowment effect, you need to enhance the financial autonomy of the urban local bodies, okay, which is the common thing when you look at the global level. Another problem is land in the urban areas is a dead capital. Now, what do I mean by dead capital? Dead capital is a capital which is not functioning as a productive capital. Why the economic survey says land is a dead capital, especially in the urban areas? Because we have a very low floor space index. What is this floor space index? This is the total area within which you have to build the building. Okay. Now, how many floors I can build on this particular piece of land? That is what is floor space index. So I'll calculate what is the floor space here of all the 3-story building that I've created, and I'll be dividing that with this total area, plot of land. So when it comes to India, since we have a low floor space index, that means you cannot create, more story building. Ultimately, what would happen? You are constraining the vertical development, so you will witness the spatial expansion, and which ultimately leads to congestion. Okay, so this is one problem. Another problem is the fragmentation of land, unclear titles, and when you have unclear titles, it becomes very difficult to use the piece of land for infrastructure creation, or you can also not use that land, because if the land title is not clear, I cannot use that land as a collateral to get loan and do some, start some business and all. Okay, so that is another problem. There are opaque records. Then when you talk about the mobility, in the transportation segment, the problem is here we are majorly dependent upon the private vehicles. Why? Because of lack of last mile connectivity. And we are not being guided by transit oriented development. What is transit oriented development? Wherein we try to build the houses, the office places, the cafes, the schools near the public transportation system, near the metros, near the railways, near the bus system. So that helps us in reducing the travel time. But that is not the common thing that we see across the urban centers. And due to this, what happens is we witness a lot of congestion, and it is also because of this spatial expansion due to this low floor space index also. And ultimately, economic survey has pointed out that in 2024, a person who is traveling in Bangalore loses around 117 hours, a person traveling in Mumbai loses 103 hours, and a person traveling in New Delhi would be losing 76 hours. And this has economic implications as well. As pointed out by Center for Science and Environment in this year economic survey itself, this report is quoted, and it points out that the Delhi congestion is leading to a wage loss which is hovering between 7,000 to 19,000 per year when it comes to unskilled worker. So this congestion also have economic implications. Now when it comes to the waste management, cities like Indore, they are doing good. But the problem is we are lacking when it comes to segregation of waste in wet and dry waste. And you need to understand that if you're not segregating the waste in wet and dry waste, ultimately processing that waste would become a problem. You'll not be able to, recycle the stuff or reuse the stuff. Then we are not immensely focusing upon dump site remediation. If a particular landfill is there and therein constantly, there's a legacy waste, all the urban waste is going on that particular landfill, we are not focusing upon its remediation. That means we are not using things like biomining or scientific landfilling so that the harmful chemicals are not leaching into the groundwater and harmful gases are not escaping into the air also. Basically addressing that legacy waste and bringing that piece of land again to good use. Maybe we can create green parks there. Okay, so economic survey has rightly pointed out that when it comes to Indian cities, we have improved the collection of the solid waste. Okay, we are improving the collection network, but still the problem is people are not focusing upon segregating the waste. Okay, This is somewhere an attitudinal problem when it comes to the Indian citizens, especially in the urban areas I'm talking. So this is a challenge. And lastly, the economic survey of this year points out that when it comes to Indian cities, we view informality as a transit phenomena. We see that, okay, this urban space has started developing. So there would be slums, there would be informal, sector thriving. But over a period of time, as and when this city would modernize, we will completely eliminate this informal sectors, the slums and all. Okay, we will completely eradicate them. But the economic survey points out that the cities are not focusing upon this thing, that how these slums, informal workers, unregistered enterprises, they absorb the excess labor which is coming into the urban areas because of the rural to urban migration, and they help in providing low cost housing near the jobs, and they serve the urban consumption also, because if you have more people, ultimately more aggregate demand would be there. So higher the demand, higher would be the growth rate when it comes to that particular area. Production needs are also fulfilled by this informal sector, which at times formal sector fail to meet. So when it comes to the urban planning, we should not see the slums, the informal workers or unregistered enterprise as a problem that needs to be eradicated altogether. You need to understand the relevance of these slums, informal workers, as well as this unregistered enterprises also. Instead of thinking of eradicating them, rather we should think of gradual integration into the formal sector, and this is something that we are doing under the PM Swanidhi scheme also. Now let's just look into that what all steps we have taken in this particular respect. Now when it comes to the land titles, we have come up with the Digital India Land Records Modernization Program. We also have this Bhu Aadhaar thing, like you have one unique identification number, the same way a 14-digit unique identification number would be allocated to a land parcel, okay, so that we can establish clear ownership land titles. And when you talk about the state level, in Karnataka we have Bhu Suraksha scheme, wherein Karnataka government has completely stopped giving physical copies of land titles. It has made a transition towards issuing digital land records. So this makes us easier for the state authorities to manage the land records and establish clear land titles. Then for the mobility thing, what we are doing, we have expanded the metro lines. We have more than 1000 kilometers of metro lines which are operating across 24 cities, and more corridors are supposed to come. Then we are making an advancement towards the green mobility also. So for this we have PM e-bus Seva. This I have already discussed in the previous Analyst, where we dealt with respect to EV adoption in India. Okay, so under this the government is operating 10,000 e-buses in a PPP mode. So if the private player is making certain losses, then that loss would be compensated by the state. When you talk about the waste management, here we have done great advancement. We have made great advancement when it comes to door-to-door collection. Waste processing has improved considerably. Then we have 2.5 lakh waste collection vehicles nationwide, and we are also tracking them using the GPS technology. When it comes to smart city mission, wherein we are trying to integrate the new cutting edge technology to make the quality of life easier. So under this, 90% of the projects that were sanctioned, that has already been completed. So smart policing and all, that is a part of your smart city mission. Coming up with smart solution to deal with the sewage problem, water problem, policing, all that stuff. Then when it comes to the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban second phase, herein also we have sanctioned these many houses, and already 96 lakh houses have been completed and they have been handed over to the intended beneficiary also. So we are creating affordable housing also. Then in PM Swanidhi, as I told you, we are not considering the informal sector to be eliminated. Rather, we are doing its gradual integration into the formal sector. As under the PM Swanidhi scheme, we are providing credit support to the street vendors, and we are also providing them this letter of recommendation, which is a kind of valid identification of the street vendors. Okay, so we are also focusing upon their capacity building. The Food Safety and Standard Authority of India is providing them the necessary capacity building, okay, so that we can ensure that whatever food the street vendors are providing, it is in alignment with the food and nutritional requirement as outlined by the Food Safety and Standard Authority of India. Now, having understood the problems that the urban centers are facing, let's just try and understand that what more needs to be done. First and the foremost thing that we need to do is providing more agency or financial autonomy to the urban local bodies. So in this respect, this year economic survey rightly points out that the urban local bodies should collect the property tax effectively, and for this we need to use advanced technology like GPS technology, GIS technology, so that we can do proper valuation of the land. Then the urban local body should levy the user fee charges for the services that they are providing, and higher the quality of services that they are providing, higher should be the user fee charges. And it further points out that if an urban local body is able to generate a minimum amount of revenue, okay, the threshold should be decided by the government itself, then they should be allowed to raise the money through municipal bonds also. Okay, so this is what we can suggest when it comes to enhancing the agency or the financial autonomy of the urban local bodies. Then when you talk about land, for that we need to enhance the floor space index, because in India we have a low floor space index, and for this digitalization of the land records is the need of the hour. Then when it comes to the mobility front, herein we need to focus upon transit oriented development, and we need to make sure that we are coming up with, we are focusing upon green mobility like the e-bus, and we are also digitizing the access to e-buses, okay, online bookings and all that we can do. And effective credit facility should be provided for this green mobility thing. That means that when it comes to loans, if I want to buy a e-vehicle and if I am going to get the loan from the bank, then some relaxation when it comes to the interest rate should be provided to me. Okay, so that is what is green mobility credit facility. And we need to focus basically upon the public transport, and we need to improve the last mile connectivity. Then when it comes to waste management, herein we should learn from India's cleanest city, that is Indore, how they have focused upon campaigning thing to bring and to nudge their citizens when it comes to doing the segregation of waste into wet and dry waste. Do bin, har din. Okay, this is the campaign. So they basically relied on the modern communication, methods, and they also relied on the nukkad nataks, radio shows, etc. They reinforced the segregation practices through these campaign, Do bin, har din. Then strict penalties were there. They also collaborated with the religious and the local leaders in this respect, and they also focused upon oath taking in the schools as well. Okay, so these are the best practices that we can adopt from India's cleanest city, that is Indore. And the economic survey has further pointed out that we also need to focus upon the non-tangible aspect, okay, when it comes to building future cities. First and foremost, we need to understand that time is a very crucial resource when it comes to urban areas. Okay, people living in urban areas, they cannot afford to waste a lot of time because of the traffic congestion and all. So for this, what we need to do, we need to go in the direction of transit oriented development. Okay, that means houses, schools, the health facilities, okay, should be located around the public transport so that the traveling time is less. Then we need to see street as social infrastructure. That means instead of focusing upon merely the widening of the streets, what we should focus upon, that wherever you are having this road thing, okay, near these road you need to have shaded areas, sitting arrangement should be there, safe passages should be there, and we need to create certain formalized space for the street vendors and all. Okay, then we need to encourage creative density also. We should not just focus upon the economic front, we should also give boost to art, culture, music, gastronomy, okay, because they are also an integral part of a city. It is not just the economy part which defines an urban areas, we should also focus upon these creative areas. Okay, so we should come up with more and more theaters. For example, we can create a craft cluster in cities like Jaipur and all. Okay, so that is something that needs to be focused. Then for integration of informality, what we need to do, we need to do capacity building of our street vendors, like what the Food Safety and Standard Authority of India is doing, enabling them that whatever food they are providing, that is meeting the nutritional guidelines issued by that particular entity itself. And we need to provide formalized space to the street vendors. Gradual integration of the street vendors should be done in the formal sector, and this is something that we are already doing under PM Swanidhi. Effective implementation should be there. Then governance that enables participation. If you want to give effect to this endowment effect, that means people should consider that the city belongs to them. For that, you need to move in the direction of participatory governance. We can have neighborhood councils, okay, we can have participatory budgeting. Whatever planning that you're doing with respect to infrastructure creation and all, that should be in the public domain, and people should be asked to give the feedback. Constant survey should be carried out, okay, with respect to road facility, with respect to sanitation, so that based on the feedback you can improve the services being delivered by the urban local bodies. And lastly, we need to come up with the cities that inspire imagination. You need to reward creativity. You cannot be just obsessed with resilience, okay. That clearly means any person, okay, irrespective of the fact that in the urban areas I might be able to earn better as compared to, where I belong. Given this wage differential also, I'll prefer to stay in the city only when I'm able to live a dignified life. I'll prefer to live in the city if I'm able to express my thoughts and my ideas that I'm having. Okay, so simply we need to create a city which takes into account the dignity of the individual, and it provides that open space that the people can express themselves. We are not robots, okay. We can only not focus upon the economy part. We need to make the people realize that the city belongs to them, and we need to ignite this endowment effect, okay. So this is what the economic survey ultimately concludes when it comes to the urban cities, how we can make the urban centers make work for their own citizens. Now, based on the discussion that we have, I have framed a practice question for you people. So do practice this, and with this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, recently a petition was filed in the Supreme Court which demanded that paid menstrual leave should be made a legal right when it comes to the working women. But in this respect, Supreme Court has raised apprehensions. Supreme Court is of the view that if we give legal backing to this paid menstrual leave, this would be negatively impacting the female labor force participation rate in India. Okay, so this particular topic we can associate with GS paper 1, issues related to women. And the petitioner has made this point that since India is a signatory as well as we have ratified this convention on elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, this paid menstrual leave should be given a legal backing. Now let's just understand that what do I mean by menstrual leave policy. It simply means when a woman is suffering from menstruation, she is witnessing menstrual pain and discomfort. So for one day in a month, she should be allowed to get a paid leave. Okay, even though she is not doing work, then also she'll be getting the payment. And this needs to be given to female employees and to the students. Now currently, there is no such legal backing at the national level for paid menstrual leave, but there are various companies as well as the state governments who have taken good steps in this respect. For example, Bihar has come up with 2 days of paid menstrual leave for every month, okay, for the women employees way back in 1992. Such a progressive thought Bihar government had at that time. Then in 2023, recently, Kerala government has granted menstrual leave for the students who are, studying in all state-run higher educational institutions. Then there are various progressive companies, for example, Zomato and Swiggy. They have also come up with this menstrual leave thing. Zomato came up in 2022 with this policy of paid menstrual leave of 10 days, and this suit was followed by Swiggy. And you will be surprised to know that when it comes to Vajiram and Ravi also, this paid menstrual leave is also provided to the female employees here. When it comes to countries like Spain, Spain was the first European country to pass a legislation in this respect. And in Spain, women has the right to get 3 days of menstrual leave per month, which can be even expanded to 5 days, because that is what is the duration of menstruation when it comes to normal. Generally, that is the menstruation duration when it comes to females. There are other countries as well which have come up with this menstrual policies. Now, let's just understand why the petitioner has made this argument that we need to provide paid menstrual leave to the women employees. First and foremost, this would help us enable the constitutional mandates. It would enable us to fulfill the idea which is mentioned under Article 15 Clause 3, wherein the state government have been given this particular, right, that they can create special provisions for women to do away with the discrimination which the women are facing. Then Article 42 clearly talks about that we need to create just and humane conditions of work. And Article 21, which talks about dignified life. So if we go with paid menstrual leave, this would be in alignment with all these constitutional articles. Then it would enable us to break the gender stereotype. If you go for paid menstrual leave, this would open up the debate and discussions on this particular topic, which is, traditionally being considered as a taboo by majority of the male population. And even by females also, not just by males. I've seen women are not that much vocal when it comes to speaking about menstruation, because it has been traditionally being considered dirty and impure. So if we go with this paid menstrual leave, obviously the companies would start focusing upon the menstrual literacy also, and that would open up debate and discussion, and the taboo that is associated with this menstrual thing, that would be done away with. Then this would also help us enhance the productivity, because when a female employee is not able to perform at her best because she is suffering from menstrual pain and discomfort, obviously she will not be able to do the work as productively as she could. And if paid menstrual leave is not the thing in the corporate houses, ultimately the women employees would be forced to back out from the corporate houses. And in order to improve the retention of the female employees, we should go in the direction of paid menstrual leave, because the IMF, International Monetary Fund, has pointed out that if we have equal participation of women as we have in case of men in the workforce, this would increase our GDP by 27%. So it also have economic implications as well. Then it would enable me to deal with presentism. Presentism means that I am physically present, but at the mental level I am absent from here. And in the workplace, this could happen if I am suffering from some sort of illness, I have some injury, or I am suffering from menstrual discomfort. So that would be negatively impacting my productivity. That is what is presentism. Physically present, mentally absent. So if you provide this paid menstrual leave to the females, this would also help them to deal with the psychological trauma that they face, okay, when they are going through this menstrual cycle. And this would also help us in reducing the dropout rates that we see, especially among the schools which are there in the rural areas, because we don't have adequate sanitation facility there. And especially when the female girl child is menstruating, they prefer to stay back at their home, because we don't have adequate sanitary pads, clean toilet facility in the schools which are situated in the rural India. Now, why do you think Supreme Court is apprehensive when it comes to giving a legal backing to this paid menstrual leave thing? The reason being that it might reinforce the stereotypes. We have, according to some women activities, we have fought immensely for this thing, that female cannot be characterized based on biological factors, based on her reproductive organs. And according to certain activists, if we go for this paid menstrual leave thing, this would point out that woman is a weaker section and she needs a special treatment. And ultimately, if that is the thing which is going to prevail among the private sector, they would not be incentivized to hire more and more women employees. Why? Because why they take this, financial burden? Why they let you have the money without you doing any work? So Supreme Court is also apprehensive when it comes to this particular idea of giving legal backing to paid menstrual leave, because Supreme Court also thinks that currently also women are facing this glass ceiling, because the management at the top level thinks that a female employee, since she has to take care of the elderly people who are at the home as well as the newborn baby, so she would not be able to effectively manage her domestic responsibility as well as professional responsibility. That is why women are not promoted beyond a particular level. Okay, you will not see very huge number of females in the top management. Okay, that is what is glass ceiling. Women are not promoted beyond a particular threshold. And Supreme Court is of the view that if we go in the direction of paid menstrual leave, obviously the companies would be going by this glass ceiling thing. They would not be giving important responsibility to the female employees. And currently also, when it comes to the female labor force participation rate, it is far less as compared to the male labor force participation rate. Male is around 79%, female it is more than 40%, but it is still less. Then in countries like Japan, wherein they already have this paid menstrual leave thing, there also, because of the stereotypes that we have, the females, due to shame and cultural taboos, they are still not coming forward and they are not availing this menstrual leave. Okay, so that is another problem. Then another problem is, even if we go with this paid menstrual leave thing, how are you going to provide this benefit to the females who are actually working in informal settings? Ultimately, even if the Supreme Court, let's suppose, give this direction to the government that you have to give legal backing to this thing, how are you going to ensure that this right is provided to the female employee who is working in informal setting? Okay, so ultimately the benefit would be reaped by the female employees who are working in formal settings only. So that is another problem when it comes to gig workers and freelancers. Then it might further widen the gender gap. According to World Inequality Report 2022, women are merely earning 80%, 18%, whereas when it comes to men, they are earning 82%. And if we go in the direction of paid menstrual leave, ultimately, since the corporate houses would not be incentivized to hire more and more women employees, because this has been the thing which has happened even after the paid maternity leave thing also. So whenever a woman, tells the bosses that I am pregnant, they come up with one or the other excuse to fire that particular woman employee. Okay, and this, because of this paid maternity leave thing, the private sectors are not incentivized to hire more female employees, and due to this we are witnessing already a huge gender pay gap. And if we go with this direction of paid menstrual leave thing, because maternity leave is, so let's suppose you will be pregnant for once or twice, that's it. But when it comes to paid maternity, this menstrual leave, this would be every month. So this would be costing heavily to the private corporate houses. So they will not be in this favor. And if you go in this particular direction, this is going to even widen the gender pay gap that we have currently in India. Economic Survey of 2018 has rightly pointed out that India has one of the highest gender pay gap. Now, what needs to be done then? Because if we go in the direction of paid menstrual leave, then in that case, the companies would not be incentivized to hire more and more women employees. And if we don't go in this particular direction, this would be a violation of Article 21, dignified life. It would be a violation of Article 42. Just and humane condition of work are not being created. So what is the way forward? So first and foremost, what we need to do, we need to address the infrastructural bottlenecks, especially when it comes to the schools which are there in the rural areas, so that we can address the dropout rates. And this is something that you need to do in colleges and all. In government colleges also, the sanitary facility is not that great. Okay, I have studied in BHU, which is a good university, but therein also the sanitation facilities are not that great. So we need to work upon that sanitation facility part first. Then we can come up with other alternatives. For example, instead of providing paid menstrual leave, we can come up with work from home settings, customized work schedule. That means if you know that, okay, a woman is going through a menstruation cycle, we can allow her to take frequent breaks. Okay, adequate rest breaks could be provided. Then we need to create an inclusive workplace environment wherein the heating pad should be there in the corporate houses, tampon, sanitary pad. So this stock should be available. Then we need to destigmatize the taboo associated with menstruation. For that, we need to have debates and discussion on this particular topic. So we need to carry out education and awareness campaigns, and this is something that you should start right from the schools itself. Okay, so that it does not remain a taboo when it comes to the upcoming generation. Then we need to incentivize menstrual leave policies when it comes to corporate houses. For this, what the government can do, they can provide some tax incentives to such companies which are coming up with paid menstrual leave policies. And if you don't want to come up with a special paid leave termed as menstrual leave, what you do, you create a healthy work culture, you increase the number of normal leaves. Okay, so that would enable the woman to take adequate rest when she is going through menstruation cycle, without mentioning this thing that, okay, this is the leave she has taken for menstruation, due to the reason of menstruation. Because what did we study in case of Japan? There are paid menstrual leave, but because of the traditional taboo associated with this particular menstruation thing, women are not coming forward and telling that I want leave because of the menstrual discomfort. Okay, so we can address that taboo thing by increasing the number of casual leave, okay, parental leave, vacation leaves, etc. Now, based on the discussion that we have, try and attempt this particular mains question. With this, let's move on to the prelim pointer segment. Now, beginning with the prelim pointer segment, the first article is dealing with the pandemic agreement. Now, when it comes to this pandemic agreement, India is seeing commonality when it comes to the developing countries, which are referred to be as group of equity. Let's just understand what is this pandemic agreement and what is this group of equity all about. Now, when it comes to this particular topic, you can associate it with the prelim segment, basically current events of international importance. Now, a crucial meeting is going to happen in this month itself in Geneva, wherein the countries have to agree upon the rule book which is dealing with the pandemic agreement. And when it comes to this particular agreement, herein India is finding commonality with the developing countries who are basically floating one particular idea, and these developing countries are basically referred to be as group of equity. Now, this commonality is with respect to sharing the pathogenic material and getting the reward in return. Okay, so the developing countries are making this particular point that if we are ready to share the pathogen material and the genetic sequence data, okay, then in return, fair, concrete and legally enforceable benefits should be given to us in return. What are these benefits these developing countries are talking about? Let's just try and understand that. Now, when it comes to this global pandemic agreement, this has been an initiative of WTO, and this was adopted formally by the World Health Assembly in its 78th assembly, okay, World Health Assembly, and this was adopted way back in 2025. However, the proper legal rules and regulation needs to be done right now. So, this agreement has been developed, as the name pandemic would be giving you this particular idea, that this has been developed in response to COVID-19 pandemic. Why? Because in the COVID-19 pandemic, we got to know this particular fact that different countries are not well suited to deal with such pandemic like situations. Okay, there are huge critical gaps when it comes to the healthcare sector. So, to address those significant gaps and inequality that we have when it comes to access to healthcare segment, okay, and to effectively respond to such health emergencies if they emerge at a later date in future, and prompting the nation to take action effectively. For this, we have planned that we will be coming up with this pandemic agreement. WHO has planned this thing. It basically aims to create a legally binding international instrument which would be dealing with pandemic prevention and ensuring effective preparedness among the countries and preparing an effective response if we are witnessing any such, if we witness any such pandemic related disease in future. Now, once it would be adopted, the next step would be intergovernmental working group, which would be created on this pandemic agreement. And why this group would be created? So, this intergovernmental working group would be doing the negotiation with respect to details of this pathogen access and benefit sharing system. Okay, and in this respect only the developing countries are making this demand that if we are giving you the pathogen, okay, the genetic sequence of pathogens, then in return we also want legally backed returns. Once it would be adopted by the World Health Assembly, which final details and all would be expected to be finalized by May 2026, then the different countries have to ratify and they have to sign and later ratify it. And then this agreement would come into effect when? Only when it has been ratified by 60 countries, and once 60 countries are ratified, from that day 30 days you will take, and after this 30 day this agreement would come into force. Okay, it is not like 60 countries have ratified, from that very day the agreement would come into force. No, it would come into force 30 days after 60 countries have ratified that particular agreement. Now, what is this equity group, that is the group of developing countries, actually talking about? So, they are saying that whichever entity is going to commercialize the products which are derived from the genetic sequence data with respect to pathogen that we have given to you, then in return we need a percentage of annual revenue back into the system. What are their demands? Let's try and understand. They are saying that, let's suppose there is a company A which has developed a vaccine, maybe based on that genetic sequence which has been provided by the developing economies. So, they are saying that 10% of whatever product that you are creating, you need to donate it to the WHO, so that if developing countries witness any such public health emergency, from WHO they can get those vaccines or whatever product that you have created by using that genetic sequencing data. And it also talks about granting non-exclusive license to the developing country manufacturers during the emergency. That means if there is a national, public health emergency in developing economies, and if let's suppose this company A has developed some vaccine and all, so licensing thing would not be applicable. They would be able to get the vaccines and all. That means the vaccine would be provided to the developing countries in case of such public health emergency at an affordable cost. Okay, because if you apply licensing thing, then the cost would be higher. But if I say that this licensing thing would not be applicable, then I'll be able to get that vaccine at an affordable rate. And you will be surprised to know this, that when it comes to European Union, who is speaking on behalf of these companies who are going to commercialize the products using the genetic sequencing data of pathogens, it has also agreed on this 10% donation floor, okay, during a pandemic emergency, which aligns with the group of equity numbers. But it has said that there should not be any legal compulsion on the manufacturers, okay. They should be encouraged rather than being compelled. So the compliance should be of voluntary nature. But the developing countries are saying that it needs to have a legal backing, okay. Although when it comes to EU, it has agreed that, okay, if a company is creating some product out of the genetic sequence data, then 10% of that should be donated to WTO, but this should not be something written in the law, okay. Now, as this pandemic agreement is associated with this World Health Assembly, let's just understand certain prelim facts with respect to this particular assembly also. So this is the decision making body when it comes to WHO. It is comprising of delegates of all the WHO member states. It meets on an annual basis, and what is the major function? To determine the policies, approve the budgets, to review the work being done by the WHO and the programs that are being run by the WHO. It is situated in Geneva, Switzerland. So these are the functions, and one major function is appointing the Directorate General of WHO. It adopts the international treaties and agreement under Article 19 of WHO Constitution, and it also monitors whatever program and is being implemented by WHO. So that is all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently the Iran envoy has stated that we would try our best to ensure safe passage of Indian-bound fuel ships through the Strait of Hormuz region, but in return they are demanding that since this year 2026, India is going to assume the chairmanship of BRICS grouping. So in that respect, the Iran government is pointing out that you give a message and condemn the attack being done on Iran by USA, okay. That is what is the demand. According to the Reuters news agency, Iran has allowed the safe passage of 2 Indian flagged LPG carriers which have passed through Strait of Hormuz. One is this Shivalik here, okay. This was the location on 30th March at 10:30 p.m. okay. The other vessel is Nanda Devi, and it is said that when it comes to the Shivalik cargo carrying ship which is there, it has the capacity to carry the LPG imports which would be equivalent to 1 day of India's LPG imports, okay. Now this particular topic you can associate with the international grouping part. Now you need to know certain prelim facts with respect to BRICS. So this acronym BRIC was coined by the economist Jim O'Neill way back in 2001, because these were the emerging economies back then. So it has the emerging economies Brazil, Russia, India and China, as this BRIC word itself suggests. So BRIC began functioning as a formal group during the G8 Outreach Summit in 2006, and it became BRICS when South Africa joined it later on in 2010, okay. When you talk about the members, initially these were the 5 members, and new members have also got added to this particular grouping. So in 2024, Iran, UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia actually joined this particular group, and the recent addition is Indonesia when it comes to 2025. On this, UPSC has already asked a question also. Saudi Arabia has not yet formalized its membership of the BRICS, and Argentina, it initially was expected to join it, but it opted out. Okay, it has not become a member of BRICS. Now, what is the significance of this grouping? It accounts for 46% of the world population. I'm talking about all these members. I'm not just talking about these 5 initial members. Okay, so they account for 46% of the world population and 36% of the global GDP. Now, what are the key initiatives of BRICS? Because on this two initiatives you can get a prelims question. One is the New Development Bank, which came into effect through the Fortaleza Declaration in 2014, and it started its operation in 2015. So what is the core aim of this multilateral development bank? So it was established with this intent that we have to mobilize the resources for infrastructure creation and sustainable development related projects, especially in the emerging and developing economies. Headquartered in Shanghai, China, and the founding members are these. There are certain new additions also, that is Bangladesh, UAE, Egypt and Algeria. You need to make note of this particular fact that in order to be a member of this new development bank, it is not required that you need to be a member of BRICS also, because the membership of this new development bank is open to all the UN members. Okay, so this prelim fact you need to keep in mind. It is not necessary to be a member of BRICS in order to be a member of this new development bank. You see, Bangladesh not a member of BRICS. You see, Algeria not a member of BRICS, but it is a member of New Development Bank. Then when you talk about the founding members, these 5 founding members, that is your Brazil, Russia, China and South Africa, they have at least 55% combined voting power. And the next crucial initiative is Contingent Reserve Arrangement. It was again established in 2015 in this Fortaleza Declaration in 2014, and it was to provide financial support to the member countries if they are facing balance of payment difficulty. So it is a short-term liquidity measure. Okay, and when you talk about this contingent reserve, it has a lending capacity of around $100 billion. Now this year, as India has got the chairmanship of BRICS grouping, India has highlighted these 4 key pillars when it comes to its chairmanship of BRICS grouping. First is resilience. It basically talks about coming up with sustainable supply chains, addressing the supply chain disruptions, navigating the global uncertainties, dealing with health challenges and climate risk. Innovation, so basically focusing upon digital public infrastructure, fintech, AI, cutting edge technology and making ourselves future ready. Another pillar is cooperation, basically enhancing the cooperation among the BRICS member countries and promoting people to people ties. And last is sustainability, since climate change is a new reality. So here we will be focusing upon enhancing green finance, energy transitions, sustainable development aligned with the national and global priorities. Why are we discussing these key pillars? Because you will get to know by seeing this particular PYQ. UPSC has asked this particular thing way back in 2025 prelims itself, that what was the theme of 16th BRIC summit. Okay, so based on the discussion that we have, please try and attempt this particular PYQ. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, going by the media reports, as report came up in the Hindu with respect to digging up the Chambal in March 2022, going by these media reports, Supreme Court has come forward and it has decided that it would be taking necessary action to stop this illegal sand mining, which is impacting the crucial ecosystem which is found in the National Chambal Sanctuary, which is also the breeding spot of critically endangered gharials, okay, or fish eating crocodiles. This particular topic you can associate with the environment section of our prelim syllabus. Now let's just note down certain prelim facts with respect to this particular sanctuary. So when you talk about the National Chambal Sanctuary, it is also called as National Chambal Gharial Wildlife Sanctuary. Why? Because the largest population of gharials, that is fish eating crocodiles, are found here only, okay. And when you talk about this particular sanctuary, it is situated along the Chambal river. That is another reason why it is named after the Chambal river. And this sanctuary is situated at a tri-junction of 3 states, MP, UP and Rajasthan. So you find critically endangered gharials here, red-crowned proof turtles here and the endangered Ganges dolphin as well. It is also listed as an important bird area. And here you find sandy beaches, hills and riverines. When you talk about the vegetation, it is part of the Kathair Gir dry deciduous forest ecoregion. And what are the other fauna species that you found here? That is mugger crocodiles, smooth-coated otters, striped hyena, Indian voles, etc. Okay, so other flora and fauna you can look into. Now let's just note down certain prelim facts with respect to Chambal river also. Now when you talk about Chambal river, it is, as you can see in this diagram, it is a tributary of your Yamuna river and it is India's most population-free river, one of the most population-free river. It originates in the Singar Chauri peak, which is in the Vindhyan mountains, and it is bounded by Vindhyan mountains as well as Aravalis. What are the tributaries of this Chambal river? As you can see, Parabati, then you have Kali Sindh and here you have Banas. And some of the major dams are built on this particular river, that is Gandhi Sagar Dam, Rana Pratap Dam, Johar Sagar Dam and Kota Barrage. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, because of this global supply shock when it comes to crude oil that every nation is witnessing nowadays because of the West Asian crisis, India is also witnessing price pressures. Okay, this particular topic you can associate with the economy section of your prelim syllabus. Now, the second data release of CPI has come up and it has pointed out a very disturbing fact that the retail inflation is 10-month high and it has reached 3.2% in February 2026. And this is largely driven by the food inflation and the rise in the price of precious metal, that is gold and silver. Now, earlier you were getting low inflation rate because of the statistical base effect. What is base effect? When you have higher base, okay, that means the base year, in that you have higher price index. So then even if there is a rise in price in this year, then also you will be getting a low inflation rate. But if in the base year you have low inflation, okay, or low price index, then you will witness a higher increase in the inflation rate. Let's understand this with the help of this example. So in case 1, price index of January 2016 is 110 and that of January 2017 is 120. Okay, so what you have to do? The current price index, deduct the previous price index divided by the previous price index into 100 and this comes out to be roughly around 9%. The same thing we do in case 2. In March 2017, the price index was 180. As you can see, the price index was high in the base year. And this year, in 2018, it has increased to 190. Just 10% difference here and just 10% difference here also. But you see the change in the inflation rate. It is coming out to be 5%. So, if the prices are higher in the base year that you are considering for inflation calculation, then even if the prices have risen this year, it would be resulting in a lower percentage inflation rate, and that is what was happening previously. Okay, but now since we have changed the base year when it comes to CPI, now this base effect is no more operating, and also because of the West Asian crisis, we are witnessing a rise in the inflation level. Now let's just try and understand that what all changes we have done in the new CPI series. So we have changed the base year, so it has been shifted from 2012 to 2022 because this 2022 base year that we have taken, that was not representative of the current household consumption pattern. So to effectively capture the current household consumption pattern, we have changed the base year. Then we have adopted the international best practice. We have now come up with 12 division in place of 6 groups. So earlier we had this 6 group, that is food and beverages, housing, pan, tobacco and toxicants, fuel and light, then clothing and footwear and miscellaneous. But now as you can see, we have come up with 12 divisions. This is in alignment with classification of individual consumption according to purpose. Okay. Now since we have also come up with this 12 divisions instead of these 6 divisions that we have previously, this would enable us to do an effective comparison with the inflation level prevailing in other countries also. So this would ensure global comparability of India's CPI, and classification of item is according to uses. This would enable us to get a more granular data set when it comes to the inflation rate that is prevailing in different segments, for example health, transport, etc. Then we have revised the weight also. As you can see, previously when it comes to food and beverages, here it was assigned a weight of 45.86%, but now this has been reduced to 36% roughly. So weights have also been changed, and we have also revised the basket of goods being covered. So number of goods being covered, that has increased, services covered, that has also increased, and we have eliminated certain items, for example VCR, CVD, DVD players, hiring charges, etc., which are not that much consumed when it comes to today's consumers. Okay, so this has been removed. So you can get a prelims question on this thing, that which all item has been removed and which all items have been added. Okay, so there you can apply common sense also. You know that whether this item is consumed by you being a new generation or not. And what all additions we have done? So we have incorporated rural housing, online media services, OTT platforms, value-added dairy products, barley and its products, pen drive, hard disk. So instead of this DVD player and all, what we are incorporating pen drives, external hard disk, attendant, babysitters and exercise equipments, because this People are becoming more and more gym freak. Yes or no? Okay, people are becoming more aware about their physical health as well. That is why exercise equipment are also being incorporated. Now, when it comes to the price collection methodology, that has also undergone a change. So, physical market price collection, that is continuing, that we used to do previously also. However, to capture the changing purchasing behavior when it comes to consumer, we are also going to come up with alternative data sources. What are those alternative data sources? So, we will be doing this e-commerce price introduction. Okay, then we will be going through online sources for select services, for example, OTT subscription and all, how much people are paying for this, and administrative data for standardized services such as rail fares, postal charges and fuel prices. What all prices you are paying for this, getting the railway services, postal services, fuel prices, etc. So these are the changes that we have introduced in the CPI series. Now coming back to the inflation scenario when it comes to India, why the inflation rate is increasing? First and foremost is the food inflation, and it is going to increase further because the scientists are predicting that we will be witnessing El Nino effect in the middle of the monsoon this year. So in the normal year, what happens is the trade winds flow in this particular direction and they take the warm surface water from here near the South America to this side, okay, towards the Australia and Asia side. So this leads to upwelling of the cold water from below, and this is good for this fishing industry and all. But what happens in El Nino year, this trade winds which were moving in this direction along the equator earlier, they become weakened. So due to weakening of these trade winds, now what would happen? The warm surface water would be carried towards the coast of South America, okay, towards this Peru coast of South America. And this would lead to generation of a low pressure area in this area. When there is a low pressure, ultimately the monsoon winds which were supposed to enter into India, they would be attracted towards this low pressure area, and ultimately this would be leading to lower monsoon rainfall when it comes to India. So El Nino is not that much good for India. So when the rainfall would be reduced, ultimately this would be impacting the agriculture productivity, and in turn this would be leading to rise in the food prices. So this is a concern highlighted by the expert because of the climatic factors. Then another factor being the disruption in the fertilizer supply. Okay, as you can see here that when it comes to India, we import more than 60% of our sulfur from West Asia to produce the sulfuric acid, which is an essential ingredient when it comes to the fertilizer industry. So if the fertilizer prices are going to increase, that means the input cost of agriculture is going to increase. That would get reflected in the ultimate food prices also. And another reason why we are witnessing heightened inflation is because of this rise in the prices of precious metals. So when it comes to India, we used to import roughly 40% of the rough diamonds from West Asia region, and this is one reason. Another reason being, whenever you will see that there is there is increase in uncertainty at the global level, people would run behind these precious metals. Why? You need to understand the consumer behavior. Now, whenever there would be uncertainty, usually we witness inflation, and that is what we are witnessing currently also. Crude oil prices have escalated. So, what is happening because of this is, when there is inflation, we know that the purchasing power of money would go down. So, I would not prefer holding that cash, because I know that even if I keep this cash in my locker, this would not be able to give that much amount of goods and services which I was able to purchase earlier before this inflation. So since whenever there is global uncertainty, there is increase in inflation, and that reduces the purchasing power of money. So instead of this, what I'll prefer? I'll prefer to invest this money in precious metals, that is gold and silver, okay? Because due to this uncertainty, their demand is going to increase, and ultimately they would be giving you a higher return because their prices would increase further. Okay, so that is the reason currently West Asian crisis going on. So because of that, global uncertainty is there, and because of that you can see that the prices of gold and silver has skyrocketed. Another reason why in the upcoming times we are going to witness more inflation in India, because crude oil, LPG, LNG all have become very costly. When the crude oil is going to increase, that means the input cost of the industries is going to increase, and whenever input cost is going to increase, ultimately the private sector is not sitting for doing any charity here. That final cost burden would be borne by you and me, the final consumers. Okay, so this I told you in the last session also, this is going to lead to this import-led inflation in India because the prices of crude oil has escalated. And this is a kind of cost push inflation because the prices of raw materials are increasing. It is not because of the demand factor. That is the reason in today's article it has been pointed out that it is going to be a very difficult exercise for the Monetary Policy Committee to bring down the inflation, because then this time the inflation is not because of rise in demand, it is because of the supply shock. And this is one of the limitation of monetary policy. Monetary policy is well suited to deal with that inflation scenario wherein the rise in inflation is because of increase in demand. It can curtail that demand by increasing the interest rate. But when the inflation is because of the supply shock, therein this tightens the hand of the Monetary Policy Committee to how to deal with this inflation scenario. Because if they try to increase the interest rate, okay, that you pay on the loans, this is going to further negatively impact the growth scenario as well, because it would become difficult to get the loans at a subsidized rate, and if this is going to negatively impact the investment, ultimately GDP would get impacted. Okay, so the article rightly points out that we cannot merely rely on monetary policy as well as fiscal policy. That is so something that you have to do in this window of opportunity, the limited time that you have, temporary period. But in the long run, you need to move in the direction of energy security. We need to expedite alternative sources of fuel. We need to reduce our dependence upon crude oil or not. That means we need to make a shift towards the green energy, renewable energy. Okay, that's all that we need to with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, last topic of today's analyst. Now, keeping this thing in mind that the crude oil prices have escalated to around $100 per barrel. So, keeping this thing in mind and providing the necessary fiscal muscle to the government of the day, the government has suggested to create Economic Stabilization Fund. This would provide the necessary fiscal space to the government to deal with such global headwinds, okay, like the current crisis which is going on, maybe in future unanticipated supply chain disruptions if they are there, unanticipated supply shocks in particular sectors, in sub-sectors of Indian economy. So, to deal with all this, the government has suggested that we are going to create this Economic Stabilization Fund, in which more than 57,000 crore rupee would be put in. And this was the reply given by the Union Finance Minister with respect to the second supplementary demand for grants, which was placed before the Parliament. The government has given this assurance that even if we have created this emergency response fund, okay, this Economic Stabilization Fund, but then also even then we have got this additional supplementary demand for grants, we will be able to stick to our fiscal deficit target, which the government has planned that it would be 4.4% of India's GDP. Now, from our exam point of view, this becomes important from the economy perspective of your prelim syllabus. I need to know the different types of demand for grants that are there, parliamentary grants that are there. One thing, when it comes to demand for grants, they can be only voted upon in the Lok Sabha, not in the Rajya Sabha. Now, first is supplementary demand for grants. They are raised when the expenditure exceeds the amount which was authorized by the Parliament previously through the appropriation bill. So, Parliament needs to pass this before the end of the financial year. This you need to keep in mind. Additional grant, it is raised if the additional expenditure is needed upon an uncontemplated new service that in that budget year. So, that new service has come up which was not thought of when the budget was prepared. For that, if I am taking the grant, that would be additional grant. Excess grant, this is when you have already spended money than what was sanctioned to you by the Parliament. Okay, so the government has spent more on a particular service during the financial year over the amount granted for that service in that year budget. So Lok Sabha would be voting on it after the financial year, and before that they must be approved by the Public Accounts Committee of the Parliament. So Public Accounts Committee have a major role when it comes to approving the excess grants. Now, vote of credit, it is granted for an unexpected demand on account of the service magnitude or indefinite character. So it is a kind of blank check given to the executive by the Lok Sabha to deal with such unique service which might come up. Exceptional grant, which is granted for a particular purpose and forms no part of the current service of any financial year. What is token grant? Token grant is just reshuffling of money from this scheme to another scheme. Let's suppose I know that okay, I need more money on a particular scheme maybe because of certain, like for example, if it is a drought year, I know that I need more money for the Manrega scheme, and I know that I can take money from some other scheme. So if I can do that reappropriation, I'll be going for token grant. So it is granted for the reappropriation of available funds without any additional expenditure. You need to know about the constitutional provisions also. So when it comes to the supplementary grants, additional grants or excess grants, they are dealt under Article 115, and when it comes to vote on account, vote of credit and exceptional grants, they are dealt under Article 116. Now, based on this, you need to answer this particular PYQ because we have already discussed, and you need to know that India, we don't have any such parliamentary budget office currently. Okay, that's all that we need to know in today's analyst. Quiz would be coming right up next, so don't forget to practice the quiz and check your knowledge, that how far you were able to grasp from this particular discussion. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a great day, all of you.